Hello, and welcome to this week's Qredible Live broadcast. As always, I'm here with our CEO and Chairman, Brian Fitzpatrick, and we are very excited this week to have Jocelyn Sheltraw with us. Jocelyn is the co-founder and CEO of Buddist, the cannabis industry's very first social review platform. She's here to talk with us today about how we can elevate consumer experience in the cannabis and CBD industries. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Jocelyn. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Well, for me, so I was raised in Orange County. I'm based in the Bay Area. That's beautiful Lake Merritt in Oakland, right behind me. And my background, I graduated college in 2007, which if you think back to that time, that was the year this bad boy came out. And I was fresh out of school, very young and hungry, and found myself working with mobile app developers. I mean, essentially at the birth of mobile. And boy, what an incredible experience that was as a very young person to be a part of a new and emerging industry. I moved then from Orange County up to San Francisco, have been, up in the Bay Area for the past nearly 12 years. And just getting to be a part of that. I mean, you can imagine the city at that time and just all this enthusiasm as Uber's being born and Spotify and all of these marketplace apps that we use. I mean, our worlds were just forever changed. And for me, just again, like that was so exciting to be a part of. And being here in California, by 2017, watching cannabis, being on the heels of about to start recreational sales, something inside of me was like, I have to be a part of this. This is the next big thing. This is going to be like an experience like I had in mobile. And for me, I think the connection point is that I've been a long time cannabis consumer. I was always the girl showing up to all the ad tech parties, bringing a joint saying, oh, you got to try this. You got to try this. And so now like building Buddist, is a combination of all of the things that I'm just so passionate about and bringing my worlds together. And it just feels really incredible. And so my cannabis journey and what I've been doing over the last 6 years, I came into the industry through Headset. I had actually met one of the co-founders of Headset, Cy Scott, through a colleague of mine when I was working at a company called Rubicon Project, an ad network. And he said, hey, listen, my neighbor was one of the co-founders of Leafly. He's building this tech company, a data company in cannabis. I think this would just be so interesting for you. I'm happy to connect you to. And the next thing you know, I was brought on board a few short months later to help expand the company market to market. And with that, I really ripped a page from kind of the Uber playbook, watching them go into market and get riders and drivers all bought in at the same time. And I took a lot of that strategy and essentially went into each, state that we were expanding into with Headset and just started driving both sides of the marketplace. I was going out and meeting with retailers. I was then and getting them sold on Headset solution. Then I was going and meeting with all the brands and selling them on Headset solution. And so it put me in an incredibly unique position because here I was like studying all the trends in the marketplace. And for those who aren't familiar, Headset's one of the leading data and analytics companies for the cannabis industry. Mm-hmm. And so then here I was studying the markets, meeting all of these founders firsthand, hearing then from them like what was going on within their business. And I just built an incredible network and community and started building a bunch of different like cannabis events. I've done C-suite events. I've done community smoke sessions, you name it. I just love being a part of this community. And I've been integrated in so many different facets of it, from your OGs up north to your corporate people, you name it. I'm friends with people across the marketplace. And it has just changed my whole life being a part of this community, because I just feel like it's like working on something that you're so passionate about and you see how it connects into all these different groups. I mean, gosh, there's just nothing better for an individual's time to be spending their time doing something they're so passionate about. And so now with Buddist, again, it's like a combination of all of those past backgrounds. And so anyways, long story short, through my 6 years now in the cannabis industry, I've just got so integrated into different communities. I served on the board of directors for the California Cannabis Industry Association, so leading a lot of policy initiatives and just really trying to help advance this industry and normalize it and elevate it beyond kind of how it's existed to date.
Well, you are one of the many people that are making things happen, and it's great to see. And I have an affinity. My whole background is technology, and although this is a newer industry for me, I guess I've been in the industry since 2018. It's been an amazing journey, like the one you're talking about, and I can hear the passion coming out, and it's really cool because, when I started Qredible with Rick McDonald, it was the consumer was really at the forefront of my mind. And I saw that CBD and marijuana was going to be this big industry, and regardless of what people thought about it and the stigma, I really started doing a lot of research and seeing the benefit of this plant, right? And it caused me to really take a perspective of saying, look, consumers need to find a way of understanding this industry. So education is lacking, research is lacking. How do we really get the benefit of the industry and find the safety and transparency and give them a resource so that they can do their research and find good quality companies? Now, what I found in doing that and trying to build that ecosystem is that companies needed the technology to actually perform quality and safety and adhere to quality safety standards. So we really started building out those that technology, and there was some roadblocks, along the road. As I mean, look, you started selling data, in a nascent industry, and they're like, what do you got? I'm sure you ran into some of that, and look how you were able to educate and kind of grow through that. And I'm sure you're now seeing sort of those hurdles in building this tech. So if you could just kind of talk a little bit about the hurdles that the industry's facing when thinking about this whole consumer experience and the kind of things that you're trying to get through.
Yep. Yep. Well, it's funny because prior to this, I was on a call with our investors and we were talking a lot about this is just so new for the industry, what we're doing, right? Like, and I'll just take a step back and just so everyone has an understanding of Buddhist. And then I want to compare it to Headset and how different that was building a market at that time in the industry. Because boy, have things changed since 2018.
Yes, indeed.
But so right now in our industry, with Buddhist, as you were mentioning, we're building our industry's first rating and review platform. And there's other rating and review platforms that exist, right? People have been sharing their opinions on products for, since for time immemorial in cannabis. But a lot of people have been using platforms like Leafly or Weed Maps, or maybe even things like Jane or Skunk Magazine or High Times, et cetera, et cetera. But what our industry hasn't had is a home that both consumers and professional critics can go to really showcase their expertise, talk about the nuances of all these products, use the 100-point system to really assess and analyze them, just like we would see with other products like wine, for example. Right. And so what we're trying to do with Buddhist is really normalize this and create a platform for people to go and share their expertise and create this kind of dual score rating system like you would see with a Rotten Tomatoes, for example, where you've got your critic score on one side, your consumer score on the other side. And then what ultimately ends up happening is that the end user gets to be able to decide, well, where do they want to put more weight in that review? Which of these reviewers might be most relevant to them? And so the problem that we're trying to solve is, to your earlier point, Brian, is about because cannabis affects all of us different. Our endocannabinoid system makes us all have a different experience with these products. Things like what we ate in the day, how hydrated we are. There's so many variables that can affect our experience. And our thesis, and I think the reason that we think this is so needed in the industry, is that because of that fact that this is just, you can have a wildly different experience. And what we've been trained as consumers to date are on basic principles of, oh, that's an indica, that's a sativa, therefore you're going to have those effects. Well, that's actually just not the case. And that's what we're learning through the reviews that we're seeing from both the consumers and our critics, is that because of based on someone's individual preferences, things like how often do you consume? What's your preferred method of consumption? What's your preferred potency? What's your reason for consuming, your desired effect? Well, the more that we know about an individual, the more that we're going to be able to decide how much weight we want to put into that review. And so our thesis with this is that long form reviews and training people and teaching people how you want to think about rating and reviewing products, how you want to think about assessing or talking about the aroma or the appearance or the flavor, the effect, the potency. This is so new for our industry that we really wanted to create a home to go do that. And in order to do that and to set the foundation to do that for long form reviews and making these very valuable for a consumer, is that we jump-started the platform by assembling a team of professional critics. And so we assembled a team of nearly 30 people that are assessing products using the 100-point system. And these individuals are some of the most respected people in the California market, which is where we've launched. And these are certified ganjiers. You know, I'm not sure how many people are familiar that there's a sommelier program for cannabis now. It's now 4 years old in its fourth cohort. And both myself as well as my co-founder, Claudio Miranda, we went through the program last year, graduated in October.
And wait, that's a ganjier, right?
Ganjier, yep. So yes, our team is made up of ganjiers. They're made up of Cannabis Cup judges, well-known cannabis journalists, longtime connoisseurs. And if you go into the app, you can see that they're assigned to a product category and they're going through and they're writing long form reviews. I mean, some people are writing 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, touching on all of these different attributes of a product. And we're training and setting this tone in the foundation for really, we like to say we're being Sherpas for consumers. And you'll see as you go through the app, there's very much a tone and a style and a format for people, for how our professional critics should write reviews and think about assessing these products. Mm-hmm. And we did that in hopes that consumers would follow suit, so that this wouldn't be like we see in other platforms where you get a 1-line or 2-line review of a product that really isn't helpful for me as a consumer. What's helpful for me as a consumer. Brilliant.
I love that approach.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing. And now when we're communicating that to the market and going out there and, you know, driving our audience, driving more buddies, driving more reviews, it's interesting because at this stage in our industry, this is just so new. Like using the 100-point system, assessing products in that way, we just haven't had a platform or home to really go do that. Other platforms use 5-star rating systems, which doesn't create a lot of conversation around the nuance of a product. And so really kind of taking a page from what we've seen in other consumer goods industries like wine or beer or coffee or chocolate, they all use the 100-point system. They all have groups of professional critics. They're standardizing the process of how to think about assessing products. And that's really what we're doing. And it's really exciting for us because now we're starting to see that consumers are coming in and contributing equally as thoughtful and long form reviews.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant. The standardization is so important because it's not all over the place. And it also helps you sort of guide in more of a compliant way, you know, from an industry perspective. And speaking of sort of compliance, you know, one of the challenges I know in the industry, particularly around like brand recognition and labeling requirements, this is a huge problem in Canada, and we've got some of it here in the US, is that, you know, the curiosity here is how does this rapidly evolving landscape and all the increasing regulation, how does it help or hinder sort of how the platform operates and the consumer experience itself? So what are they, you know, what challenges are created as a result of that?
On the brand side, or?
Yeah, like I know that there's certainly marketing and branding restrictions. So the strict regulations around cannabis marketing and branding and limited business ability to effectively communicate their product information. You know, they're sort of restricted. So, you know, it seems like, but it sort of helps that brand recognition a little bit, right? It's the opportunity.
100%. I mean, that's one of the biggest like benefits to the community or the ecosystem at this point is really to the brand, because, you know, I don't know about your Instagram channel, or how you all advertise, but we're just very limited as brands, even though we're not plant touching brands. Like for me personally, as well as our Buddhist account, we're shadow banned on Instagram. So that's why you see our community so active on LinkedIn, for example. And so for us, part of our ethos and the reason that I think we're getting the response from brands that we are is because, again, the brands don't have a platform where they can go directly connect with consumers, where they can directly go share their story in a way that's elevated, in a way that the entire ethos is around the brands and products. If you look at the other platforms in the market that exist, they're either a strain database first, they're a retail directory. There's no other platform that's dedicated solely to the brands, to the products. And so that's really why I think the brands are just so excited about this, is because now they have consumers out there, they have critics out there that are going and telling their story for them. And then it gives them an opportunity to connect directly with those consumers and get feedback from them. You know,
because when there's lack of sort of brand loyalty because of the limitation of them being able to tell their story, it seems like price then becomes an important driving decision, and it shouldn't be. Right. So how do you tell the quality story? How do you tell the experience story if all you're left doing is competing on price and nobody understands your brand? So that seems to solve a lot of that.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at the history of wine, for example, you know, in the early 1980s, here you have this lawyer named Robert Parker who comes along and starts documenting all of his tasting notes. And he starts going through and tasting every wine that he can get his hands on, documenting that, creates the 100-point system, Wine Advocate. And then the next thing you know, you've got the birth of all of these critics. You've got the sommelier program that comes along. Then you've got Wine Spectator and Wine and Finnis, et cetera, et cetera. And this whole market is born. And then what happens is that because prior to 1980, I mean, people have been consuming wine, you know, forever. But it wasn't until that point that you had those key inflections. You had the critics, you had the publications, you had that expertise. Those were the catalyst moments that led to premiumization. That's when the consumer understood, okay, Robert Parker, 99 points. I'm going to pay $1,000 for this bottle of wine versus $10 for this bottle of wine that's rated 84 points. But that's a good value wine for the price. And so that's the overall problem that we think that Buddhist is going to solve. It's that tipping point for the industry where then you start to have consumers understand the quality of products. And that's not just to say the high-end craftsmanship, but it's, well, what's an everyday smoker that's a reasonable price point for me? And so that's really what's going to be, I think, this tipping point for our industry.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I'm that guy that is like holding up his phone at the wine store, you know, and looking around like, oh, let me check this one out. Because what I want to see is I want to see the tasting notes, right? And I want to sort of compare that to my tastes and see what lines up best. And I'm like, oh, this is a little bit too heavy in tannins. I'm out of here, right? I'm going to move on to the next one. So, you know, I think that's, and even when I was promoting this broadcast, because I couldn't wait to talk to you about this, it's, you know, I sort of paralleled that to my wine experience. And, you know, but I think one of the differences sort of, you know, we've seen like the wine industry's been around, you know, since biblical times, right? So, you know, we know it's been around a long, long time. So there's not the same stigma. There's not the same policy issues. There's not the same, hurdles that we have to jump through. So, you know, as much of being as technologists that we are, because we're both technology, we also have to be advocates, right? We have to, and here you're driving policy change, you're actively involved in that. You know, what do you think are some of the advocacy work and policy changes that are necessary to really build this community that is consumer focused?
Yep. I think about this a lot. And it's funny because I've been involved in so many different groups over my 6 years that are all different forms of advocacy groups. And I think what actually at the end of the day is most impactful is that it's simply ourselves as individuals going out and talking to our communities around us, our family, our friends, putting it out on social, because as we know with cannabis, this was a user like pushed forward initiative. This wasn't our government driving this. It was us as individuals. And I think that's actually the best way to really move cannabis forward and move the needle is through our individual selves communicating with our direct communities. And of course, I'm not saying that it's incredibly impactful to get involved in groups like CCIA or Normal or the Equity Trade Network or Supernova Women or whoever it may be, whatever you identify with and what policy is matters to you. But I think at the end of the day, let's not overcomplicate this. Let's continue to just normalize this within our own communities. And then we're going to continue to see that trickle effect. Because at this point, you can't argue with the data. I mean, the latest Gallup poll showed what? 80% of Americans agree cannabis should be legal in some form. So the more that we're just out in our communities continuing to normalize that, then the more this is just at some point to our government can be like, okay, well, this is just crazy that this is the situation we're in.
Yeah, it really is. And there's just such stigma we got to get over. And we've got, you know, better consumer education is required. And certainly, you know, I'm looking at this from sort of the supply chain optimization side. And, really what are the things that we need to do to bridge the gap between, consumers and producers, because that is sort of the next level. So, because you're working with both. I mean, you're working with the consumer and you're working with the producers, and we need to sort of bridge the gap there, because there seems to be a not good understanding on brands. We know that you're helping to solve that, but there's also seems to be an issue of transparency and communication. There seems to be a lack of consumer education. There seems to be a lack of consistent quality and safety. And it's like, I don't think we can keep ignoring those things. I think we have to talk about it. What are your thoughts about that?
I could not agree more. And it's funny because I often think about, my experience in mobile specifically, or just having been a part of that industry from the birth. I just wonder if a lot of us entrepreneurs at that time would have thought about the impacts of excessive social media use,
Hmm.
of whatever it is, that the harms or the negative sides of having an on-demand world, or just be living in our phones. We just didn't know what we didn't know at that time. And often when I'm thinking about cannabis, because I don't know about you all, but I've certainly used cannabis in time periods of my life where it was not healthy. It was not in the best interest of coming into my own consciousness and being a really conscious consumer. And so I think that's a conversation that I think we should be having and thinking about as the industry matures. And that's just something I'm thinking about. Like, if I would have known and thought more carefully at the beginning of the mobile app boom, like, would I have then made different decisions in the businesses that I was a part of along that journey? Would I have been raising questions? And now I'm thinking about that here, where it's like with Buddhist, it's, for me, it's very much about conscious consumption. Like, know what you're consuming, have an understanding of it, and make your choices based off that. And I just hope that as our industry moves along, we get out of this just about being high potency at products and really using it a way that's going to be just beneficial to us as users, and just having that level of consciousness around this.
Absolutely. And I think in order to get there, and I'm so happy to hear that I sort of knew from your background that you're a promoter of quality and safety and, and all of those things, because that's really what's going to help this nascent industry. It's still somewhat immature, to really grow closer to, food safety qualities, and knowing that where this is coming from. And someone said, well, there's track and trace technology. So I'm like, look, track and trace is really all about where the money is. That's really what that is. It's not necessarily driving, quality and safety. So, these brand stories are, I think it's not only important in understanding the what the tasting is and the tasting notes, but you also have to, we have to talk about the quality and the safety aspects of these brands and what they're doing, about it. So this is one of the areas where, Qredible's really focused on bridging that gap. We're looking at increasing transparency and trust. So we're not just sitting there saying, hey, you guys need to be safe. We're providing the tools and technologies to help them, right? To reduce the cost of that compliance and reduce the cost of safety through technology. Because, it's great. I meet with a lot of really cool producers, and it's not like they're ignoring safety. They are interested in investing in this. And the cool thing is that the standardization, efforts that we've been involved with for testing and labeling, getting these brands involved in these standard efforts is one of the things Qredible has been involved in, and also improving consumer education. So my view was we were first going to launch the consumer side, but I said, you know what, we still have a lot of work to do on the producer side, right? So, what the way you're going about, I think, is really, really cool. And I think, there's sort of a positive overlap, in what you're focusing on and what we're focusing on. But we're both really out for, the same thing. So I want to really talk a little bit about what it takes to assess cannabis quality, and how, Buddhist is helping with that, and what some of your thoughts are about the things like, you said it, we're going beyond, the THC content and the story of indica and sativa. What are those other things that are about quality and the things we should be talking about?
Yeah. Well, every category is a little bit different, as we know, but ultimately for every product category, there's a couple like main criteria that one can assess. And from our end, what we're trying to do is really professionalize that in terms of how you think about assessing a product. And I'm talking little things about like, well, do you eat on an empty stomach before, or do you have an empty stomach before assessing? Do you want to consume this product at the same time as you're assessing so that you have some comparison for any new products that you're assessing, some baseline, I guess I should say. And so in the industry to date, I mentioned going through the Ganchier program, right? And it was modeled after the sommelier certification. And I share this because now our industry has the program's 4 years old. There's a couple other programs out there that have this type of education or certification. But essentially what Ganchiers are trained to do is much like a sommelier. You're trained to, with flower and concentrates in particular, you're trained to go through and analyze 50 different data points from a product. You're assessing the aroma, you're assessing the appearance, the flavor, the effect, the potency, all that good stuff. But beyond that, and to your earlier point, is that there's things like age and storage. Well, how properly stored was this product? Like you're looking at the cold chain management. By the time it got from the brand to you in your hands, like were the trichomes intact on that flower? What was the trichome density? There's all these incredible attributes within a product that we're trained to look at. And this education, this knowledge is really being developed in real time. Again, like that program's only 4 years old. So we're taking a lot of that. We're taking a lot of what's been done in the wine industry. We're really inspired by wine. One of our investors is one of the world's leading wine critics. So we're very fortunate to be able to have a lot of that understanding of how connoisseurship developed in wine and how people professionalize that process of assessing products. And so we're taking that path. We're training our buddists. We're training the community that, hey, okay, if you're assessing a beverage, what are the things that you want to look for in a beverage to deem this a quality product? We have to go through and train the entire market on that for every different product category because it's different for every different product category. But really, you can summarize it as those 5 key attributes: the aroma, the appearance, the flavor, potency, and effect.
That's awesome. And I really want our listeners to understand how they can take advantage of Buddhist and how they can get involved. Can you talk a little bit about the platform and how a consumer can get involved and get it, so they can start using this?
Yes. Well, so just to know, we're very new. Like we just beta launched the app in early December. We spent all the way up until March just beta testing and doing all the typical things you would do in that process, testing out bugs, getting all of our buddists trained and professionalizing that process of writing reviews, making updates to the app. And in early March, that's when we publicly announced our debut in the California market. So unfortunately, if you're not it's California brands and products at this point, as well as our buddists. But anyone can come into the app, even if you're not in California, and just start to see what products are trending. Who are all of these buddists or these critics, and how are they assessing products? It can be used for education at this point, and honestly, market research if you're in another state. But we invite you to come in and anyone can start reviewing products within the app right now. Not every product is available within the app because, as I'm sure you know well and good, the data in our industry is very messy, not having like a universal kind of product data. And so we had to take the path of being highly curated, and we're adding new brands and products into the app every day. But essentially, people can come in right now. They can create their own profile. You can identify what kind of consumer you are, connect with other like-minded individuals, and go through and start reading all of these different product reviews and contributing your own. And for
That's exciting. I just have to tell you, I'm really excited about the fact that you are a new app, because some people say, oh, well, it's so new. Guess what? That's the benefit, because, this is a new industry. And you've been, I know you guys have been doing a lot of research to get this right. And the launch has been done carefully. So it's not like you're rolling this thing out and, you're doing it right. You're testing it in the right market, and you're really rolling it out. So I'm thrilled about this, and I can't wait till you start to expand further east.
us too.
What's the plan? What do you think the rollout and the plan is for that?
End of this year. Yes,
Okay.
we're going to start expanding end of this year. And I just feel very fortunate because that was essentially the playbook that I used at Headset, going market to market. And there's a very standardized playbook there. Obviously, it differs for what we're doing, but we're going to be able to start expanding at the end of this year. And so we're going to come out to the East Coast. That's most likely going to be our next market. We're listening to the community, and we got a ton of people hitting us up on all the channels, honestly, every day. It's really, really cool to see the enthusiasm and the excitement and the support just across the board for this app. And it's not even just an app. It's really a community, right? Like the app is how we kind of translate our knowledge and our expertise. But really at the heart of this is a community of really passionate people that want to go nerd out and celebrate and talk about all of these brands and products. And so we're doing that by hosting a bunch of events, which we're going to create that atmosphere and that process to do tastings like you would do in wine, where we're all learning from each other and learning how to assess. And so we're going to start, rolling that out. Market by market here at the end of the year.
That is awesome. And make sure when you're coming to the Philly area, you look me up, and I want to be part of that rollout. I want to help build the excitement because I think you're doing great things. Jocelyn, you got a great background. You're one of the pioneers in the industry, true technologist, truly passionate advocate about this industry. And we're fans. We're going to keep watching what you're doing. And it's just so great to have you on the platform. So, and to be talking about these wonderful things. So keep on going. Let's make things happen. And we're going to keep watching.
Appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Brian.